Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah. I'm with the Midwest Writing Center. And for folks who don't often tune in, today I will be interviewing poet Tate Lewis-Carroll, and then I will give updates on the Midwest Writing Center, and then we'll have a 5-minute free write. So let's talk about Tate. Tate Lewis-Carroll, husband, chicken farmer, Starbucks barista, and internationally published poet with works translated into Arabic, serves as poetry editor for the Octillo Review and as editor for Callisto Gaia Press. They've received an honorable mention for the 2022 James Tate International Chapbook Prize. They are the editor of the 2022 Texas Poetry Calendar Anthology. Their work has been anthologized in contemporary surrealist and magical realist poets from Lamar University Press, and also appears in Hotel America, Frog Pond, Modern Haiku, December Magazine, and others. They live on a small farm in central Illinois with their photographer wife, Izzy, miles in between the nearest towns. Find them on Instagram. I'll put the handles in the chat or somewhere out in the woods. And I'm reading that from the back of this beautiful poetry collection called What's Left. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Tate.
Yay, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I like these videos that you do, so I'm happy to be a part of them.
Thank you so much. I didn't write this down, but I think I have to ask. I think you probably get this question a lot, and I have already been asked it myself, so that's why I'm asking it. Tell me about your last name.
Yeah, okay. So I bring the Lewis, and my wife Izzy brings the Carroll. That's about it. When we got married, we wanted to hyphenate our names, and because taking either of our names just didn't feel quite right, because we both liked our last names and were connected to them, and we did Lewis-Carroll instead of Carroll Lewis, not to be like the author Lewis-Carroll, but because Carroll Lewis has 3 L's in a row, and that was too many L's.
Okay.
That's about it.
Thank you. Yeah, I was like, maybe they're related to Lewis-Carroll. I don't know. Cool. I like that much better.
Lewis-Carroll was actually a pseudonym, in case you did not know that, for the author.
I did.
So if anything, I'm the more authentic Lewis-Carroll, because mine's on my driver's license.
Definitely that. I love when folks take or combine names. I think that's so beautiful. So I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
So back to basics. How did you start writing?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think for most of my life, I have circled writing, but never really got to it until college. I found a number of little notebooks or diaries I've had from elementary school with these awful spy novels I've written in them and stuff, but and I've written a lot of music over the time too. I'm a musician, and I've been in some bands, and I have an album out from I did so long ago, but I don't know, it never felt like something, what's the word, worthwhile, or something that I could give myself to, until I actually met poetry with a capital P, and that was in college. And actually my dad's sickness and death, which is what my book What's Left is all about, for those who may not know, it happened at the most opportune time for me too, I think. It just fit in my schedule perfectly.
That's convenient.
Yeah, it was convenient. So I went to Illinois Wesleyan as a nursing major to begin with, and all through high school I was pretty set on, I'm going to be in the medical field, I'm going to be a doctor, or I'm going to be a nurse practitioner, or something, I'm going to make lots of money, I'm going to help people. And went to nursing school, and I did terribly, and I was very sad about it. And so I was put on academic probation. And so I was like, okay, I need to not be doing this and spending money going to college for a degree that I don't like and I'm doing poorly at. So most of my family now on my mom's side all live in Florida. And so after that first year, I ran away to Florida for a year. And then I came back to Westland because with my low GPA, they're the only people really who would take me. I was like, okay, so what kept me from flunking out of college? It's like the papers I had to write. So I'm just going to go in as an English major and, and then I'll figure out what I want to do. Yeah, who has it easier than English majors,
No papers to write there.
So then, yeah. So then I came back to town. And this is when, so my dad and I have always had a distant relationship, but he was still in town. And so we were, I was more of an adult at this point and he was older and we were trying to reestablish our relationship or our connection. And so I moved in with him. And this is right about the time too that I connected with Izzy for the first time. We had knew each other in high school, but never really talked or did anything until this time. And then I was enrolled in poetry like 201 with Dr. Joanne Diaz, who is fabulous, love her. And then my dad got sick and 6 months later he died, so then immediately I had this urgency with poetry. And my professors, particularly Dr. Diaz and Dr. Mike Tooney, were very insistent on, this is it, this is write about this, tell me about it, what is going on, So during those like 6 months or that semester and a half, my dad was sick and living in the hospital mainly up in Chicago. And so during the week I'd be at class and whatever. And then on the weekends, or many weekends, not all of them, but I'd go up to the hospital and spend the weekend just kind of in one of the chairs next to his bed, and just kind of doing my homework and figuring out how to write.
I did not.
So I guess that's where it came from.
I did not expect such a deep answer, I guess. But that's why I asked that question. I try to ask it. I don't always ask it to everyone I talk to about writing, because it's about 50% I've always done it, and about 50% something really extraordinary like that. So it's yeah, thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say that when I was in elementary school, I'd go to the public library in town, and for some reason, I had no idea what I was doing, but I would go to the poetry section and I would pull out this big old thick volume of Leaves of Grass, and I would read Walt Whitman. There's one poem in particular which I had memorized in elementary school, and I would just kind of say it to myself throughout the day. It was Pioneers, Oh Pioneers by Walt Whitman. And I have no idea what drew me to that or what fascinated me to Walt Whitman, but I also think back fondly to that, the mystery of it,
Do you still like Walt Whitman?
Oh yeah. I actually have a Walt Whitman quote on my arm. And a number of copies of Leaves of Grass. And anytime anybody writes something about Walt Whitman, I'll read that book or buy that book.
That seems like that has not left you. Tell me about Walt Whitman then. Why does he affect you, or how maybe?
I don't really know. I think now a little bit more mature in my poetic thinkings. I think now what draws me to him is a number of things, but one the length of his lines, the length of his poems, these 50-part poems that go on for 100 pages. I love that. And I think that is brilliant when it's well done and it's effective. And as a haikuist, it seems like impossible, but to the way that Whitman is able to connect with the reader in such a quiet and intimate way. He can be all these grand ideas and what is our place and what are we, the way that poets do, but then that Whitmaic, if that's a phrase, turn to the and reader and you here with me, or in his poem, shoot, what is it? As I wend with the shores I know. Shoot, I forget what the title of that poem is, of course, but to just the way that he turns to the and you reader bent over like a ghost bent over and watching me from years or hundreds of years in the future. We're here together right now, and isn't that so special? And that, I mean, that's too what the beauty of writing. I don't know, it's just something about him that just kind of, it gets me going,
Yeah, I didn't mean to ask a scary question, but that is sort of the secret magic, not so secret magic of art, is that like there's not an answer. We're moved by art because art is moving. I mean, or at least there doesn't have to be an answer, but I like when people can parse it out, and I love when someone who cares a lot tries to parse it out.
Yeah.
So you've sort of
the tattoo on my arm. Sorry.
No,
I think there's a little bit of a delay. So if I'm interrupting you, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but here I go anyway. The tattoo on my arm is from Leaves of Grass, from section 21, and just a little quote that says, "I exist as I am. That is enough." I don't know, something about that just sticks with me. Obviously, right here, it sticks with me now.
No, literally. No, that's beautiful. That's really important. And I think that's a message that most people need to hear. Personally. Yes, there's definitely a lag, and I will always want you to finish speaking. So if you are being interrupted, just keep going.
Okay.
So you've kind of answered that. What's left is, I'm just going to make a statement. What's left is about losing your father in the basest description of the book. And you've sort of answered how that came to be. You were discovering poetry at the same time that your father got sick, but how did it become a book?
Yeah. Well, in that Poetry 201 class that I mentioned, I was trying to write like song lyrics or something in the very beginning, and nothing was really connecting, and I was worried, like, uh-oh, this major isn't going to work out either. College is dumb. What's going on? But then I remember this one, so I remember this one particular assignment. We were learning like poems that are conversational, or they have multiple voices in the poems, or you're speaking to someone in conversation somehow. And when you do that, you bring the outside voice in italics. And so the assignment over the weekend was to write a poem that had a conversation in it. And this was one of the weekends where I was going up to Chicago to spend the weekend, just kind of next to my dad, because my dad, his illness progressed quickly. And so soon after moving into the hospital, he was not very aware, and he had a ventilator in his mouth for a long time. So he even if he was awake, he couldn't speak. So most of the weekend was him just kind of sleeping, and nurses coming in every, their shifts to check on him or whatever. And then, so I was there trying to do my homework, trying to write this poem with a conversation in it somehow. And I turned to my father and wrote my poem in conversation with him, someone who no longer could speak back to me. And the poem happened to be Ventilator, which was, I guess, the first poem written in this collection. But I brought it back on Monday and turned it in. And I remember Dr. Diaz taking me aside and said, this is poetry. Like, this is what you need to be focusing on. And I said, oh, okay, can I write the rest of my class and then the rest of my years just on this one subject? And she's like, do it, go for it. And so that's kind of, I don't know. So then I left, when I graduated Wesleyan, I had so many dad poems, and I was encouraged to put them together into a collection, and it turned into this, turned into what's left.
I'm looking at Ventilator right now, and it's, I mean, yeah, it's a special poem. Do you ever read it aloud? I'm interested in how you read it when you read it aloud.
I would love to read it aloud if you'd like me to.
Yeah, go for it.
This
Thank
is
you.
one I've practiced reading aloud so many times, and so I have a method, I think, but I like the idea of it being read aloud. It's not easily understood. Let me just read it, and then we can talk about it if you want to. Ventilator. In. His gelatinous tongue swells, and in. He drowns out till the ventilator activates. Out. His breath. In. Refuses to out ever or shift in or coil out, like dandy in lion paratroopers out, chaos in invading late May out. Instead, his scar in red lungs fill out with sterile in barren air out. His tube in hums and out, ags him up in long like a pit out, bull on a in aim and out, angles death in be out yond his leash.
Thank you. I mean, that's how I read it, but then I also read it without the breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely, especially visually, the breathing and the em dashes are really, really powerful. So I was excited to hear you read it. Thank you. And also, I would assume it would take practice. So thank you for practicing.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
How I don't really know how to word this. The way I have it written down is kind of simple. So how long did it take to compile, to revise? Was it pretty much just ready to go? Like, how did that work? This book is like polished. I can't see I can't see this coming. I mean, I know really talented student writers, but it's just like, this is a complete book of poetry. So tell me about that process, please.
Well, I'll start with Ventilator. I think I have 25 drafts of it saved on my computer. It is very far from where it started from. I think in particular, Ventilator started with complete thoughts, and then in, and then complete thought, and then the in and out of the ventilator going, was not interrupting the pattern of speech at all. But no, this book went through tons and tons of revision, constant. I'm still like, it's hard for me to read it or look at it now and not want to like circle something or ooh or this or something. It's just, and I think I don't know if it's going to be true about all of my work, but I think particularly with this work, I've spent so long in different classes learning about poetry through writing this particular book that I had in mind. And I think that that has kind of shaped my thinking towards it, as this will always be my my study guide or my handout, you know, the thing that I will come back to as my root for thinking about poetry. Because I also can look at these poems and I can see their inspirations from a particular poem or poet that I was learning at the time, who I now know and love or cherish or no longer do or whatever. But at the time, be like, oh yeah, that's my Gary Schneider poem, or this is whatever, my Lee Young Lee poem, or my Cornelius Eady poem, you know. But so there is, like I said, I have so many Dead Dad poems now, and lots of them were thinking of making it into the book and didn't make it into the book, or they did and they were taken out later. So when I think I actually started submitting it shortly after graduating, or maybe like while I was still enrolled, and that the submission process and getting those initial many rejections, you know, makes you return to the work and makes you revise and rethink it as, you know, an objective viewer, how a editor might read it or whatever, to the point where I had cut back so many poems that I started submitting it as a chapbook, which is how it was first picked up at Finishing Line Press. They accepted it as a chapbook. But then through, you know, after the getting accepted and kind of contractual stuff, there was some sort of discrepancy where my chapbook was 35 pages and the requirement for a chapbook in their press was 34 or less. So then it was going to be cataloged as a full length. And I thought, well, I reached out and I said, I don't want this to be a full length. Like, I have all of these poems that at one time were in the book, you know, that I felt more complete, and I have these pictures that I had wanted to include, but, you know, it wasn't really working, so I took them out. Like, what do you think about reconsidering, like letting me throw in some new poems or some new old poems and let me know what you think? And they said, go ahead. So then I didn't do that. Instead, I had 2 months and I wrote half of the book kind of from scratch and submitted it. And they said, sure, go ahead. So even more Dead Dad poems. I was just not ready to be done with it, I think.
I can't. That's got to be a really extraordinary situation. I can't imagine it being like, I guess go ahead and make a bigger book. I'm glad you mentioned the photos. I had forgotten that somehow. For reference for the audience, I reviewed Tate's book, What's Left, for Little Village magazine. So you can find out how I feel about it by looking at Little Village. And something that does do some heavy lifting is these photographs in the book, and they're color photos. Not showing up really very well on my computer, but it does some, I don't know, grounding work. So that's a really cool addition. I'm really excited that you got to include that. You don't see that very often. It is, you know, more expensive to include color in books. That's cool. I'm really excited that you got that. Obviously, right, I benefited from it, but it's really cool and probably relatively unique that you got that from chapbook to full length in, I don't know, almost by accident. I mean, definitely you took charge, but it was unexpected.
Yeah, it was.
I say a lot. You don't have to stop for me. So my apologies.
Oh no. Oh no. I get that. I have a full house of pets as well.
Thank you. That's nice to hear. You have several chapbooks, or maybe not several. You have chapbooks in addition to this full-length book. How is that different putting those together? What maybe are the themes that you see in those?
Yeah. Well, my chapbooks are actually just kind of these little self-published handmade books that I've been doing myself. You know, it's not I've gone through a press to get them done. And they've turned into I write as much as I can, you know, which there is so little time in the day to actually write. So most of my writing is in haiku. And I always try to keep around my little journal with me, you know, so I can, you know, in my 10-minute break at work, I can jot down some haiku, or on the drive home, I'll jot down haiku, or when I'm brushing my teeth, I'll jot down a haiku or something, you know. And then I had this drawer full of notebooks that, you know, once you have filled a notebook and closed it, it's kind of like, you know, it's hard to get yourself to go back and find those again. And so then I just kind of started taking my favorite ones, or the ones that I just couldn't let go of, the haiku, I mean, and just put them in a Word doc. And I was like, okay, I should try to do something with it. And so then I started just making these little haiku books. And then it got me, I have a couple here in front of me. Then it also got me artistically into another venue, which would be like book design, you know, and making these little like covers, like painting this cover for Miss the Fish. And then I drew this one in pencil, evergreen, but just like little vehicles for these little poems that kind of go out into the world, and then just a way to hustle poetry, you know, get a little extra money in the side.
I was trying to
Actually, and I have a third one. Go ahead.
Nope, I want to know about the third one.
Yeah, well, so I have the normal public library in my town is having a reading and book event thing for me on Saturday. And so I'm trying to get this third one finished before that happens, so that, and, you know, I can bring something else to sell. And I'm not married to the title, but I kind of like it. If you can see it, it is N/early spring, nearly early spring. It's kind of the idea of it. These little haiku chapbooks are turning into like a series of seasonally situated like haiku as they kind of happen in my journal, you know. And of course, I'd be willing to share some of these from the new one if you're interested at any time.
Yeah, I'm hoping to do a haiku focus with you in the future. I was looking around here because I have a stack. I got a new desk, and I've sort of half rearranged my office. And I was gonna say, oh, like one of these, I keep those, or at least especially when I had a job like being a barista, which is my favorite job that I've had. I would keep it on me all the time because you don't know, and you can't have your phone, you know. So I love that.
The little notebook, you mean?
Little tiny notebooks, yeah. Because otherwise I would end up
Mm-hmm.
with 14 different pieces of receipt paper in my pocket, and they were all crumpled and horrible. And nobody liked me doing that.
Absolutely.
I know haiku is your favorite, but before I dig into that with you, how do you feel about formulaic poems in general?
That is a good question. Because to me, I don't see haiku as very formulaic. At this point, my thoughts now are these I think in haiku to myself at this point. It's though of course it is a form, and I have always kind of generally been against form. Being a grandchild of Whitman, American poetry is free, free verse and blah blah blah. You can write as long as you want or as short as you want, and you know but I don't know. I think that if you can get something beneficial from a form, and truly, like, some of my favorite works are written in form, and I I think the reason I've always been a little anti-form is because I'm not good enough to follow all those rules and make something worthwhile with it.
The folks I know who love formulaic poetry find themselves, I mean, this is what they've told me, I'm not psychic, find themselves having an easier time working with constraints, because otherwise I assume it's like blank page syndrome. I'm not sure, but that's what I've been told, is they have an easier time creating within restraints. I was going to go from here into haiku questions, but I was going to take a note, and now I've entirely lost the thread of what that note was. So I was going to write down something you said, but I found my notes from when I was writing my review of your book, and I thought that might be fun to share.
Hey now, yeah.
I have lots of things written down, like page numbers to reference or like themes, but then I wrote, which is how it looks, I don't know if you can see this, but it's like epigraph, and then page 1, stanza 2, lines 4 through 8, and then page 2, stanza 2, like that at the top. And then it says, then I've got a list of the At My Father's Wake poems, and then it says ventilator, form and repetition. So I was already into that one. MRI, what's that?
I said, nice.
MRI, Anatomical Man, and then I've got a bunch of quotes from Anatomical Man, which are, cancer does not obey any god but itself. So good. And what a jealous god it is, always taking. With a jealous god.
That was one of the poems I wrote in like those 2 months to add on to the book.
Oh, so that one, clearly this is probably just a stanza, but I wrote the quotes down separately. With a jealous god come commands, come severed limbs, come rivers of blood, come seeing the devil's hand. Jesus Christ.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop. This is like many pages. Because I was reading it as a PDF, not in the book where I write all over books, and also not like an ebook. So I had to take hand notes. So it's a lot of like full quotes with the slashes, so I know where the line breaks are. And then I have to go back and fix my shorthand because I'm used to doing shorthand so that I can copy it correctly.
That's awesome. The old-fashioned way.
I'm trying. I had a short-lived effort to digitize my life. It went really badly. It's just not how my brain works. And I'm just now recovering from it. So now you've seen the evidence of that. Okay, so you think in haiku is probably one of the coolest sentences I've ever heard. Why haiku?
I don't know what it is exactly, but it's just from the moment I was. That's not true. I think I know exactly what it is about it. There's so many things about it. From the moment I was introduced to it in school, I actually sorry, I'm getting excited thinking about how to answer this. I'm trying to approach it from a logical standpoint. I graduated from Wesleyan with a double major in English writing and religious studies. And though
not what I expected.
Wesleyan
I'm
did
excited.
not offer concentration, Yeah, they don't offer concentrations with their majors, but if I were to have concentrated in something, my religious studies would have been in Zen Buddhism. Just all of my classes were about that. And the religion department, when I was a major, there was only 3 of us. So I got to kind of take whatever classes I wanted to, and a lot of them would be just me and a teacher, so we really got to dive in. So I was learning about haiku from the English point of view, how to write them, what is significant about their writing style. But then I also got to kind of take a back door and look into the history of the people or the cultures that were writing haiku. And it's such a lovely idea, the way that haiku was shared originally. So Japanese poetry dates back a long time, but there are poems, poetic forms called panka and renga that date back to the 700s. I think 719, there are some that come from. Panka just is still widely used all over the world today. It's still probably one of the most popular poetic forms. And that to haiku poets is, we in America and in a lot of Western cultures, we think of haiku as being 17 syllables, which is not, and we can get into that in a minute. But tanka would be 31 syllables, so an epic, compared to haiku. And renga translates to chained poem, or kind of like a linked verse. And what that was doing is a number of poets or people would come together and they would contribute these little verses, these haiku-sized, styled similarly, verses one after the other to kind of complete this poem, a renga, R-E-N-G-A, in case you're interested.
Writing it down.
And there was 2 approaches. Yeah, there was 2 approaches to renga. There was one that very much followed the strict aesthetic form, where the first stanza, each stanza had a name and had a specific part to play in the poem. And then there was also the less aesthetically strict, the more lenient style, where people just kind of write, and so to complete like a regular renga or whatever, it would take 36 stanzas. And sorry, where am I trying to go with this? So I think I should say too, the history of Japan in the late 1st century, sorry, not the 1st century, the 1st millennia. Is that the word for 1,000? Like the first?
Yeah. And I remember this from Futurama, because when Fry goes into the future, he says, wow, 1,000,000 years. So it's wrong because it's Fry.
Yeah. Love Futurama. I'm so glad you brought that up. But yeah, so Japanese culture was very influenced and kind of under the control of Chinese culture. And so all of the courts and all of the universities and the higher ups, the nobles and stuff, would speak and write in Chinese, whichever specific dialect of Chinese it was at the time. I'm not sure. And then the more common people, the poorer people of Japan, would speak Japanese. And that's where these writings, these haiku stylized poems, were happening. And it was very, very what's the word? Very inclusive. Anyone could write it, and everyone would write it. And like, you would go to the market and people would, oh, hi kitty. What a pretty baby. People would be willingly sharing these little verses with each other, in passing, write something down, pass it along. And two, it was a popular form of just entertainment. They would have Renga parties where maybe someone would invite people over and some poets over to their house, and the whole night would be centered around these poets composing this long verse, this chain poem together, while everyone else is kind of drinking and eating and carrying on into the night, and then
Can we do that? Can we do that?
I would love to do that.
I want to do that. I gotta.
Right now, or sometime.
I'm writing
in
it
the
down.
future.
I'm gonna contact you about it. We're gonna have a party.
Okay, that sounds awesome. I will familiarize myself more with Renga if you want, and the pieces that go into it, and we could have ourselves a Renga
cool.
party. Because doesn't that sound lovely? Yeah, doesn't that sound
Yeah.
awesome? And then too, so like poets would come together and they would do that particular thing because they'd be kind of hired as entertainment for the party. But also like families would keep parchment on the table, and throughout the day, children, mom, dad would add to it just about updates, what's going on with them. It was a way that people were connecting with each other. And it's such a beautiful form. So then in the 1600s, Matsubasho came along, and he took the opening verse of the Renga, which was called the Haiku, and he made it its own standalone poem, which then became known as haikai, and now as we know it as haiku. So since the haiku then has officially been around since at the middle of the 1600s.
Forever. We'll say forever.
So itself has been around, forever, pretty much forever. But the tradition in which it came from has been around for even more forever, which is just, it's so cool, It's like an alligator, how evolutionary really, it has not changed since like the prehistoric ages, because it's perfect the way
It's perfect.
It is.
I love so much. I mean, this is what, really makes me a lit nerd. How like intertextuality is just unavoidable, right? You, anytime you make art, you are in conversation with all the art you've ever seen and lots of art you've never seen. And I love that this is that in like microcosm, right? Just collaborating so much on it. It's we do Exquisite Corpse a lot as just an exercise to get your brain going.
Oh,
this is
love the Exquisite Corpse.
Yeah, but without being blind and without being, I mean, you can probably be as silly as you want, but God, that's so cool. I am so excited. You're going to get a lot of emails from me in the near future. My cat, his name is Fool. He is wonderful. He is not dumb. Is laying on my questions for you. Do you have a little bit of time? I lost us a few minutes, and I would love to keep asking you questions if that's okay.
I do actually. I am pretty free. Actually, the only thing I have going on tonight is my D&D group is getting together, but that's later in the night, so plenty of time.
And that's another opportunity for creative narrative forms. Just gonna throw that out there.
Definitely.
I will turn everything into a writing lesson.
I am a bard and a ranger, of course.
I am neither surprised nor no, I am unsurprised, and I am fully delighted. Okay, so here's a question. I've been hearing this a lot, and I don't know anything about it. I understand that haiku is not as simple as we were taught in school, right? That it's not 575, go on with your life. Can you tell me what a haiku is?
I will do my best. I mean,
I like I gave you the history.
I'm speaking on a very very strict aesthetically strict form that has been around and contributed to by way more talented poets than I will ever be, So I mean, Pebble speaking to the mountain here. But no, haiku is not 575, get on with your day. There is no refrigerator in haiku. I feel like I see that all the time. People explaining how to write a 575 haiku. Like, it doesn't matter because you can say whatever you want. Refrigerator, something like that, which just makes my skin crawl. No, it's not that. The 575 actually came from in the 1800s. Western writers became very interested in Eastern cultures, which is, I think, kind of always has been, and it still is today, right? And so they honed in on this poetic practice that had been going on for, then also a very long time. And they're like, this is so cool. We need to translate this. We need to, study this. We need to figure it out, which is a good thing that they did, but they also did not get it right the first time around. So in the Japanese language, it's not words, but more characters, but for the sake of our conversation, we can just say words. The words in the Japanese language are so contextually based, so much more so than in English, whereas the meaning of a word is shaped by the words that come before it or come after it in the syntax of the sentence. But in a haiku, it being so sparse, there was so much room for, non-native speakers to translate the language. And so they were having a very, very difficult time translating it. So they kind of created this structure so they can plug in words and then say, okay, done, move on to the next one. They were even so one thing about haiku is that there are no titles because it's very they're happening in the present every time you read them. They're happening to the reader, they're happening to the writer. Hi, kitty. And so the kind of add a title, I think it makes it too like grand of a thought or a statement or something. It's an entrance and exit into a poem, as we know titles are, and that's not what we want with a haiku. So they were adding titles to them, and they were translating them into iambic pentameter too sometimes, which is crazy and did not work out. But a good haiku, whatever that means, we want three things to happen. The jigo, the Jigo, as is translated in English, which is probably the most important. Well, I don't know, they're all important, but that is the seasonal word. That is the setting, the place that the poem is happening. That is where we are situated in nature, where we're watching this thing happen. Because haiku, to its core, is probably the most purest form of nature writing. There are many other haiku related forms that, if your haiku is technically not a haiku, it can just fall into one of these other forms. But for those of us who write haiku today, we'll just kind of call them haiku. But a haiku is kind of defined as a human in nature. It's kind of our place, our interaction with it. So in the jigo, the seasonal word is, like I said, the setting or where we are. And that is not necessarily just like a place or just a time, but it's, the jigo can be a full moon, because now we bring our associations of what we know that to be. So now we know it's nighttime. We know we are outside, or at least looking outside enough to see the full moon, right? We're situated there. And then you want two, but rarely three, mainly two images. And you want your images to kind of work like spark plugs in a car. And if you don't know what a spark plug is or does, that's okay. It's when you turn the ignition and they're the little electrical pulse that works together to jumpstart the engine. And if your spark plugs are placed too closely together, they'll burn each other out, and you have to get new spark plugs because they don't work that way. And if they're placed too far apart, that electrical charge won't connect and your engine won't start. So what I mean by being too close together, if the poem becomes too predictable, too expected. I've been giving some haiku lectures actually at different high schools around the area recently, so I'm in this frame of mind already. I wish I had my notes in front of me, but that's okay. So a bad haiku of your images working too closely together, something like October, the color of falling leaves are orange. Something like that, right? That's pretty predictable. You can kind of guess where we're going from the start of that. That's a weather report. Our spark plugs are too close together. Nothing is happening. And if our spark plugs are too far apart, something like somewhere flying saucers in the dishwasher. Like, what's going on there? Those images aren't really working together to kind of create this image or this, something that you want to happen with the haiku. Let's see, actually. So I guess I could keep going and use probably the most famous haiku in any language. If you ever study haiku or ever look up haiku on Google, this haiku will probably come up in one of its many translations. So it's a Basho haiku that goes, old pond, a frog leaps in, water sound. Old pond, a frog leaps in, water sound. Now, that haiku is not one of my favorites, but it does do a good job of illustrating the kind of three aspects of what we want a haiku to do, to kind of create this image and that little turn in there. So the jiko there would be the old pond, which I'll get to that in a second. But in Japanese culture in the 1600s, it was very, if there was a frog in a poem or a piece of literary work, you know that what seasonally that means. It's the new year, they're coming back, and the frogs themselves will be singing like peepers, It's just, that was very expected, or very, a very common image to have frogs singing in your poems. But the way that Basho diverts our expectations is this particular frog is not singing, but instead the noise it is making is with its body as it's jumping into the pond. So that's kind of where that surprise, or that, that second spark plug image being far enough away where it's not doing something what you expect it to do, but not something like the frog is, turning into a prince, or something unrealistic, or something kind of crazy, And then in that particular poem too, I think old pond could be just an old pond, a pond itself being old, so maybe it's uncared for. Maybe that kind of gives us a look into, maybe this pond is isolated, or speaker here, Basho, goes here to maybe be alone or something. But also, if we want to take it this far, the old pond could be the language itself, or the the art of this particular writing, which has been around for, in Basho's time in the 1600s, 1,000 years at least already. It is an old pond, and this frog has been doing the same thing, but instead here now it's not singing, but it leaps away, and the sound it makes is the splash of its body.
Something that really interests me.
I could.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I could drone on about haiku and all day. Please interrupt me.
I would really like you to. I intend to talk to you about that later about getting you to do a haiku 101 for me. But something that really
Okay.
struck me that was maybe not unexpected, but not surprising, but unexpected, was that there's a lack of cultural competence that led to the way that we see haiku, including just in your frog poem, you said um, that that's enough to know the season, and I'm thinking, cool, summer, like, and that's not right necessarily. I don't know what season it is for New Year's. I don't know when New Year's happens in Japan, but I'm already wrong just with that, just with me trying to place that one moment. And also this, I'm sure in translating haiku, there's a lot that goes into it. If you want to have meter, or if you want to add all the necessary context, I love that cultural context and cultural competence is necessary for reading this. That's it's like a workout.
It is for 10 words or less, that's too where we kind of want our haiku to be, is maybe 12 syllables, around 10 words or less. That's kind of what is considered to be standard today. And like, you said you got it wrong. You thought frogs in summer. Don't like beat yourself up. Like you said, that takes some cultural awareness. The New Year's would happen at that particular time in spring, when everything starts to kind of grow back. That's when the New Year would begin. But
That's logical
I
to
think
me.
if you were to read more contemporary haiku written by maybe poets in Illinois, the jigo, the seasonal word, would be much more apparent.
The context is, there's so much to what context can be. I'm
Yeah.
gonna give you my last question, and we can move on. But I hope you'll stick around so that I can ask you those other questions about haiku 101 and Oranga Party.
Yeah.
Why do you write?
Yeah. Oh, why do I write?
I know I gave you a real easy one there.
I can't not write, if that makes sense. It's just since figuring it out, I just figuring out that this is kind of it. This is it's just how I am best able to express myself, or include myself in my own life, if that makes sense. There are so many times when I wish I could pull myself out, and I can do that through writing. Or sometimes I wish to insert myself into something, and I can do that through writing without negative complications or whatever. But really, just, I don't know, I just can't not write. You said me too. Is that how you feel about it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, why? I don't know. It's a compulsion. But I find that when people
Seriously.
are asked the question, they say some pretty things. Plus, I want to know. So
Yeah, it's just,
no, keep going.
yeah, just so much of my being, I feel like, almost maybe to an unhealthy amount, my mood is dictated by my writing, and how much I've gotten done or how much I've not gotten done. And I can be cranky and kind of snippy if I get kind of caught up in my head and can't get anything on paper, and to the point it's just kind of what I am. I'm a writer, and if I'm not writing, then what am I doing?
Yeah.
Which is tough to do
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
an adult who has to work jobs and do other things.
You have a life and responsibilities. Thank you.
D&D group.
Yeah, that's a responsibility and a life.
Definitely.
I'm going to go ahead and give updates on the Midwest Writing Center. And your free ride will come after that. Wait, I have my calendar this time. So today, right now, the last call for our How to Start a Story workshop with Ida Zalelian is tonight. It's on Zoom, 5 to 7 Central Time. You can do time zone math on that for yourself. We will be taking the idea of snapshots and developing them into larger stories. Ida Zalelian is an incredible teacher and an incredible writer. We're really, really lucky to have her with us tonight. Then on Saturday, we have Writers Studio. That is, again, both in person and online, not hybrid. Those are two different groups. You can either join me on Zoom or go to the Writing Center and the ground floor of the Rock Island Public Library from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central. In my group, I can't speak to the other one because I haven't been to it, though I'm sure it is just as welcoming and productive. We want to make sure to give you the advice that you're looking for to make your piece fit what you want for it. We're not going to be giving you advice based on our own taste. Next Tuesday on Write More Light, we're going to have Mary David Saver, author of Cozy Mysteries and a really big part of the literary community here locally. She does a lot of work teaching and collaborating, so that'll be really fun. On the 8th, next Wednesday, we will be announcing the winners of the Iron Pen contest. And then on Saturday, the 11th, we're going to have our award ceremony and reading. So folks who placed folks who placed in the Iron Pen contest are welcomed to read. We'll be giving out those awards, and we'll do our drawing for the free tuition of the Collins Writers Conference. On March 12th, that's a Sunday, is our next collaboration with Nahant Marsh. That'll be our youth nature writing workshop led by Madeline Young. That is, I believe, at 2 p.m. at Nahant Marsh. So that's for youth between kindergarten and 6th grade. It's gonna be really great. Maddie's a good teacher, and Maddie is really passionate about both writing and nature, and so 3 things, and youth education. That's I think that's what I'm going to give you for now. If you're looking forward to more workshops, we've got another workshop on telling family stories with Ida Zalelian on April 6th, and then National Poetry Month is in April, and we're going to have a poetry workshop at Nahant Marsh, followed by the next day a reading at Roz Talks to celebrate both our nature writing workshops at the Marsh. That'll be another collaboration, but also to celebrate National Poetry Month. Okay, that's my updates on the Writing Center. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Our free write for you, I'm not going to put 5 minutes on the timer. You can do it in whatever amount of time it takes you. We would like you to try your hand at writing a haiku. As always, thank you, and write more light into your life.